everybody, I'm Elizabeth Hines with Our Paleo Family, and Thanksgiving is over. I hope y'all had a great holiday, and we are moving on to Christmas, Christmassy time holiday baking, and we do a lot of baking in my house. If you look at my website, ourpaleofamily.com, I have lots and lots of treat recipes up there, several posts just all about Christmas cookies, and have links to the various recipes. I have fudge and just all kinds of goodies. And one of the first recipes that I created a paleo version of was my molasses gingerbread cookies, because they were always my favorites. And I thought, if I am going to do this paleo thing, I've got to have my molasses gingerbread cookies. And so I worked it out, and I posted it up on my website just in the first couple months that I had it, honestly. And then I started selling these cookies, and so I took the recipe down. And I've done that for a couple of years, and it's just, I can't do it anymore. So I'm not selling them anymore, which means I can give you the recipe again. And all of those cookies that I have been selling are going to be up on the website. So there's gingerbread, chocolate chip, which are the best chocolate chip cookies ever, if I can say that. Baklava, if you're somebody who misses baklava, spanakopita, that sort of thing, I have a spanakopita recipe in my book, and I have made baklava. And I was selling my baklava pretty regularly, so I couldn't give you the recipe, but again, since I'm not selling it anymore, I'm going to give you the recipe and you can make it yourself. But some of these treat recipes, to really replicate that original flavor and texture that you love, they're a little bit complicated. So I'm going to be showing them to you. I'll definitely show you the baklava, but I'm starting with gingerbread because I know your kids are probably about to get out of school, and this is a great thing to do with your family. So let me show you how we get started. And I've already measured, so it'll be a little bit quicker. There's just a couple steps to the process. So like I said, the recipe is on the website, and they're called gingerbread cookies. Paleo, grain-free, dairy-free, as simple as that. And you can scoop these into just circles if you want to do that, but you also can roll out the dough, and that is what I'm going for today. So I have measured my dry ingredients. I'll tell you about that in a minute. Here are my wet ingredients. But first off, I have in my pot, set over medium heat, medium-low, I have a half a cup of coconut sugar and 12 dates, actually 11. I took one out so I could show you. So I buy these pitted, I'm probably not going to say it correctly, but I say medjool dates. You can find different varieties of dates in most grocery stores. Sometimes they're in the produce department, sometimes they're in a bulk bin. I order mine online from nuts.com. They're pitted already, so you pay a little bit more for that, but it is worth it. But occasionally there's a pit in there, so that's what I wanted to show you. Before I stick it in there, I always just kind of squeeze it, make sure there's not a pit in there. And then sometimes there's a little hard stem piece, and just pull that off too, because it's really not going to get soft. So I have my coconut sugar and my dates, and this is 1/4 cup of blackstrap molasses and 1/4 cup of honey. And I'm cooking these because, for two reasons. One, the dates need to soften, and two, the coconut sugar, you want that to melt so that you don't have a grainy sugar. I'll just try to get it all out of there. Now you can put a little bit of oil in your measuring cup. Sometimes I'll measure my fats in there, and then I'll put in my sticky liquids, and it does just slide right out, but I didn't do that today. So this is not really particular. In my recipe, I say to set it over medium-low heat, simmer for 5 to 8 minutes, stirring occasionally. It's just, you don't want it to boil over, which it will boil over if you don't pay attention, because it'll be a big sugary mess. You want to cook it long enough until the coconut sugar is dissolved, which coconut sugar is really big granules. It's easy to see. So once that's dissolved, you will know it. And then about that time, your dates should be softened as well. And then we're going to run that through the food processor so it is smooth. So while that is cooking, doing its little magic, I'm just going to mix up my wet and my dry. So in my dry ingredients, I have a couple kinds of flour. Mostly almond flour. some arrowroot starch, and a couple tablespoons of coconut flour as well. And you really kind of need all three. If you didn't have coconut flour but you have the others, you could add more almond flour, but the coconut flour really helps with the texture. And then I have some baking soda, salt, and then all my spices. And my spices are making it this nice brown color.
That was pretty funny. Remember what you said?
So that's my Christmas clock. I'm not going to edit that out, so yes, Luke, your little words are going to be in the video. So that's my Christmas clock we got from my grandparents when they passed away. And I would keep it up all year long because I love it, but some other person in my house is happy for the new year to come when I take down that clock. And it plays us a little song every hour, and I just love it. So, pardon that interruption. So my mixture here is really boiling, which is fine. I just don't want it to boil over, so I turn my temperature down so it will simmer. And I just mixed my dry together. And honestly, you don't have to do that. Sometimes I just dump it all in, but because I was measuring out ahead of time, it was in a separate bowl. And then in this bowl, these are my wet ingredients minus all the sugars, and it's simply 1/4 of a cup of palm shortening and 1/4 of a cup of coconut oil, 1 egg, and I think a teaspoon of vanilla. It's in here. 1 teaspoon. And again, I know it's a little bit fussy, 2 kinds of fat, but trust me, it makes a difference. So most of these recipes, most of my recipes are not just like off the top of my head. They are some old recipe that I cooked, or my mom cooked, or my grandma cooked, and we're full of flour and sugar and all kinds of things we can't eat now, and I've recreated into something that we can eat. And this recipe is based on a molasses cookie recipe from my grandmother, and it used butter and Crisco. So I had tried, I made that recipe all the time, and I tried it with just butter or just Crisco, and it was not the same. I like my gingerbread to be just a little, like sort of that crispy shell on the outside, but soft and chewy inside. Not cakey, but chewy. And they're perfect, and you really need the 2 fats for that. So if you're setting up your paleo pantry, I would definitely recommend you have some coconut oil and palm shortening anyway. And all of these actually are basic paleo pantry ingredients. So once you get that built up, you'll have all of these things. So I'm looking to see if my coconut sugar is dissolved. There are a bunch of bubbles in there. I think it is, so I'm going to let it go for just a couple more minutes. Okay, so I'm sort of mashing on my dates to make sure they're softened. And again, I'm looking for coconut sugar granules, and I don't see any. So I think we're good. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to push that to the side. And then I'm going to put it in my mini food processor. And you can use a blender. I love this little food processor. You can certainly use a big food processor. An immersion blender, at least mine, is not powerful enough to chop up those dates. You really want them really small. You don't want this to be a date cookie. All right, so pour that in, and it's hot. That was boiling sugar, which will burn you for sure. And there are ventilation holes on the top of this thing. I usually grab a washcloth, just whatever's handy, just rinse it out and just put this over the top and actually kind of drape it over the edge, because this is my old one, and so sometimes it leaks out. And then these food processors, these little ones, have chop and grind. One spins the blade one way, one spins the blade the other way. So I just kind of alternate back and forth, and it really chops it up well. Okay, let me just take a peek at it. I might have to run it a little bit more. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so I have raw egg in this bowl, so I want to carefully incorporate my hot sugar. mixture. I'm just going to let some of this drip off in here. I know you could just dump this in your sink, but it's just wasteful. All this good quality food is expensive. I don't want to waste a teaspoon of molasses and my good raw honey and all that good stuff. So, scrape off as much of that as you can. And in the sink. And at first, well, let me show you how smooth this is. So there are tiny little bits of date, but that's a pretty liquid mixture. And I'm just going to slowly, I'm going to whisk while I drizzle this in. So this is now becoming like a typical batter for most baked goods. We have a liquid mixture and a dry mixture, and we're going to combine them together. All right, nicely mixed and no scrambled eggs. Yay, which was my goal. So again, scrape out as much as you can. Ooh, sticky mess. Have some hot water handy for sure. So I do a lot of experimenting for y'all. I do make a lot of videos with some things that I've never made before, and that's probably kind of dangerous. I shouldn't necessarily do it. But I'm a pretty experienced cook, and I don't say that in a cocky way at all. It's just a fact. I am. And I was really taught to just cook and not necessarily follow recipes. So I generally get away with it. You know, I know what I'm doing, and I know the flavors that I like, and I've been cooking paleo for a long time, so I know how to make it. I know how to make it taste good. So I'm okay with kind of winging it, but I'm not winging it today. I've made this recipe so many times. I made it the old traditional way, and I made it the paleo way, and so I actually know what I'm doing today. So I'm just going to mix these together. I just don't even want to mess with a mixer. I'm just going to use my bowl that's big enough and a nice sturdy wooden spoon. You can certainly use a hand mixer or a stand mixer, either one. And like I said before, you don't even have to combine the dry ingredients ahead of time. I usually don't. You just do want to make sure, if you don't combine the dry, that you be sure to get all of your spices mixed in really well. So we're not going to have instant gratification here because this dough is too soft to roll out. Now, if you wanted to just drop them, make like a drop cookie, you can, use your spoons or your scoopers like this kind of deal. You could do that right now, but because I'm going to roll them out and make gingerbread men, it has to be refrigerated for a little while because, our sugar mixture was boiling, so I have a really hot mixture here. And you can see it's pretty loose. And there's no way I could roll that out. It would just be a big gloppy mess. So this just gets covered with plastic wrap, and I'm going to stick it in the fridge for a couple hours. And I need my spatulas back. I stuck them in the sink. I'll show you how we roll them out and cut them out. There's really nothing magical about that. It's just like regular cookies. But I will show you anyway. So chill out for a couple hours. Actually, you don't have to. My cookie dough is going to chill out for a couple hours. And then I'll be back to show you the rest of the process. I wish you could smell it. It smells really good. Okay, see you in a little bit. Alrighty, so we're back. My dough has chilled for an hour and a half, I think, in the fridge. I didn't let it go quite 2 hours, which is what it says in my recipe. But I tested it, and it is cool to the touch. It's not warm anymore. And it's going to be colder around the edges, more chilled than in the center. So I'm going to work with this in a couple batches anyway. So I'm just going to scoop out what I'm going to work with first from around the outside. And then I'll put the rest back in the fridge and let that keep chilling while I work with the first batch. Does that make sense? And also, I'm going to flatten that down a little bit see that? And it will chill even faster. If it were really cold today, I would just set it outside, but it is not super cold. So let me put this back in. Okay, so what I have set up here are 2 baking trays. I have just lined them with parchment. You can use these silicone baking mats, which I do like because you wash them instead of throwing that away, but you do have to wash them. So when I don't have as much time, I just use the parchment paper. And I have some cookie cutters. I have my arrowroot, and most importantly, I have this bench scraper, which honestly, this either came from Williams-Sonoma or possibly online, but I really think it came from Williams-Sonoma, but it was a long time ago. I have linked to one on my website that seems equally sturdy. You just, in my opinion, you don't want a real flexible one. You want a nice, sturdy stainless steel bench scraper. And so I've just put some arrowroot on my counter, and I'm going to gently roll this out. And you saw when I scooped it out of my bowl, it's still pretty soft. It's not like a super hard, stiff dough. So it's rolling out really nicely. It's a little bit sticky. Just keep sprinkling on a little more arrowroot so it doesn't stick and rip. And you want, it's really, when I write up recipes, several things are difficult to really translate into words. And one of those is being able to tell people how thick to roll out cookie dough. And for one thing, that's just a matter of preference for, you know, like a pie dough, something like that. For these cookies, I would like them, it's about 1/8 of an inch. It's definitely thinner than 1/4 of an inch, probably a little thicker than 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so I'm definitely going to need this. You don't have to stick with just gingerbread men. We usually do whatever shapes of cookie cutters the kids pick out. We have a ton. We've inherited them from several people. So I just make a little pile of the arrowroot on my counter, and each time I will stick my little cookie cutter in there and try to fit it around so you don't, pardon me, waste a lot of dough. So we'll do these small ones. These come out to a really nice little size. I have this big guy, which, of course, if you put a plate of cookies in front of a bunch of children, they always will pick the largest ones, right? So if you don't mind your kids, other kids, whatever, eating a giant cookie, then by all means use the bigger one. But here I got out a star because I think this just makes a nice size cookie. Someone who's maybe trying to control themselves a little bit. That one just popped right off. But then when I bake these, I try to utilize my dough. I'm trying to be efficient here. So make the biggest one I can. As I'm baking them, I try to put on the same tray cookies of like size. In general, because the thickness is the same, they are going to bake about the same time. But if I had a whole bunch of the small gingerbread men and a whole bunch of the large ones, I would definitely, you know, bake them separately. And then just use your scraper to pick them up. They'll puff up a little bit in the oven, not too terribly much. You don't have to leave a ridiculous amount of space between. Try to tap off any big blobs of the arrowroot. got distorted a little bit as you picked it up, just fix it when you lay it down. Straighten that back out. No problem. And I've got, these guys are both big. So you definitely want to make sure you have a good coating of arrowroot on your countertop, or you can roll out parchment on your counter and roll out your dough on that if you prefer. Because if you don't, then your dough will stick to your surface, and then they'll really get messed up when you pick them up. You can see it's a pretty sturdy dough, even though it's soft. And then sometimes when I put them on the sheet, I'll sort of move their arms and legs and make it look like they're running or something, just to be fun. So then you just gather this up. If it gets to the point where you feel like, wow, it's way too soft, I think I'm gonna need to refrigerate this before I work with it again, go ahead and refrigerate it and let it rest in there for half an hour before you roll it out again. But I think I can get away with another batch before I have to let it chill. So let me coat this again really well. And I have a half a tray over there empty, so I'll cut out a few more of those larger sizes. Whoops! I was trying to not add too much arrowroot. Just a little bit more. Smooth that back out. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple snowmen. They're big ones too, roughly the same size as the big gingies. So they're just fun. They're fun to decorate. So on the website, along with the recipe, it just is below the cookie part of the recipe, I have a recipe for a paleo icing that you can make if you want to. And I have made it, and it works, and it tastes good. It's just sweet. You really just want a little bit of something, oh, excuse me, you just want to be able to decorate, you know, put some eyes, a little scarf, some buttons on your cookies. And I find that for this purpose, I just go non-paleo and I make a powdered sugar icing. It's easier. See, my little snowman looks like he's waving. Isn't he cute? So we'll get him on there. I'll try to get all these guys on. All right, you can move over and make space. One more. Okay, then I'm going to get these trays in the oven and they'll bake for about 10 minutes. And I'll get this back in the fridge to chill. And actually, while that's chilling, I'm going to make the icing for you. So, like I said, I have the paleo icing recipe. You can certainly use that. Or you can go non-paleo, like me. And I really don't measure this. You just want some powdered sugar. Whoops. Pour it all over the counter. There is organic powdered sugar. I had this left over from making my daughter's birthday cake, because that takes so much sugar to make. I made that marshmallow fondant. It's totally not paleo. The cake is paleo, but the icing and the decorations are not paleo at all. And it's too expensive to buy all that organic powdered sugar, so this is regular. The only difference really is that for the sort of non-caking ingredient in these mainstream powdered sugars, it's going to be cornstarch. And in the organic ones, they use tapioca typically, so it's more paleo-friendly ingredient. So most of the powdered sugar, that's probably a cup and a half, close to a tablespoon of meringue powder, which this is gluten-free, but the #1 ingredient is cornstarch. It's cornstarch and egg whites and sugar. But the reason why I use some meringue powder in my icing is that it helps it to harden and form a crust. It still tastes good. Let me get a little water. It'll take a little while for the icing to harden, but I just let my cookies lay out on the counter like I'll decorate them in the afternoon sometime, and it does take a while for the icing to fully harden, but by the time, it's bedtime, they'll be good to go, and you can put them in your container and stack them up, and the icing won't get all soft, you won't mess up the ones on the bottom level with the ones on top. So you just slowly add water a little bit by a little bit until you get the right consistency. Again, you don't want it too thin or just run all over the place. And you don't want it so thick that you can't pipe it. And I didn't sift my powdered sugar. I could have, but I'm just going to beat it up. So this is too thick. Okay, I just need a little bit. So I'm going to try to add just a couple drops at a time. Or you'll get in that scenario where, oh, it's too thin, I need to add some more sugar. So you add some more sugar. Oh, no, it's too thick. Now I gotta add some more water, and you could go back and forth forever. But see, if you just mix it, those little lumps are gonna come out. So it's already smooth, it's not lumpy, but that is too thick. I would kill my hand trying to pipe that. So just keep adding a little bit at a time. Almost there. And I don't need to taste this. I know that it tastes good because it's sugar, right? Sugar and vanilla. Oh yeah, that's great. That's perfect. Just like that. So, on the website you'll see some cookies that I decorated, and they have red and green. So sometimes I will, when I'm doing this with my kids, we will make this icing and then just divide it into thirds and leave some white, color some green, color some red. So you saw what I did there. I took a quart size zip top bag, and this is not a cheap one, okay? So not from the dollar store, a nicer quality bag. And if you have piping bags and you want to use piping bags and tips, real decorator tools, be my guest. We do that sometimes as well, but for something like this, I'm just going to use the disposable bag. They work really well. I can fill up lots of bags, so the kids and I do it. We can have 3 bags of white icing and 3 bags of red icing, and we'll all be working at the same time, so we'll have this counter covered with cookies. We'll have so many cookies. And then so I stuck it in the glass so it would stay still for me. I folded over the edges so that I wouldn't have icing all around the closure part, so I made sure I get a good seal. So I want most of the air out of there. So just gently push that out and then close it up really well. And then I'll kind of get myself ready to pipe, and I want my icing down in one corner. It doesn't matter which corner, just one of your bottom corners. And you're making a piping bag out of this, so think piping bag shape. Okay, so kind of get that started, and then I'm just going to set it in my glass like that so it can be ready for me when my cookies are ready. We'll just set that to the side. And I'm going to keep rolling and cutting and baking, and I'll show you when we get some out of the oven. Okay, so I got my first tray out, and they really grew. So these were my big gingerbread men, and these were my snowmen. And it's real tricky. You see they're just getting brown around the edges. That's when you want to pull them out. It's harder to tell when they're done than with, say, a sugar cookie because they're so dark in color already. So you have to pay attention. About 10 minutes. So if the recipe says 10 minutes, then you want to check on them in 7 or 8. Okay, so we're going to make some faster ones now because I'm not in the mood to roll and cut cookies today. Okay, so I'm going to do snowmen the scooping way. So I have these different sized scoops. They're actually technically called dishers, and they're very inexpensive. You can buy them online, or you can buy them. I got mine at a restaurant supply store here in our town. I feel like I had a different size. So I'm using my smallest scoop my medium scoop, and a large scoop. So talk about a big cookie. This is going to make a big cookie. So if you're doing a party and you want to give a cookie as a favor, or you want to give a couple of these to a teacher with like a coffee store gift certificate, something like that, these will be great for that purpose because they're super cute. And when I first made them, I was worried that they weren't going to cook evenly because, you know, the small ones, the small scoops, the medium scoops, and the large scoops, but they cooked perfectly. They were great. So, and then this one is pretty big. This little scoop is, it kind of has a mind of its own in the springs on its own. So make sure I get it down in there. I love these scoops for cookie baking and lots of things. They're great for muffins or cupcakes too. They make it a really neat and simple to fill your little tins. But with cookies, you get exactly even sized cookies, which is great. So there you go. They'll bake just like that. And you know what? Now that I'm looking at these, I'm thinking, because I don't have anybody, I mean, we could always find somebody to give these to, but my kids are just going to eat these. I'm going to just cut each one in half. So I'm going to have half size. Okay, so these are my large. These are the bottoms of my gingerbread. Do you see what I mean? So those are all my bottoms. These are all my middles. I'm going to cut all of these in half and roll them into balls. So we'll have a more reasonable sized snowman. I hope that makes sense. I have certainly made them the large size and happily eaten the whole thing. But we're going to try to be a little bit more reasonable here. So when I was selling my cookies, I was telling you at the top of the video that I was selling them for a while. The gingerbread and the baklava were the top sellers because they're really yummy, honestly. But I think the thing with the gingerbread is the texture. They're just this perfect texture of just a little bit crisp on the outside. When I just sold them as, you know, a molasses cookie, a ginger cookie, I would roll the tops in maple sugar. Talk about yummy. That was really good. Which you could do that with these too. If you didn't want to decorate these, just put a little maple sugar on top. Now the interesting thing about this recipe is that when the cookies first come out of the oven, I mean, of course they're hot, so once they're cooled to the touch, they will be crispy. And you'll say, Elizabeth, you told me these were going to be chewy. But they will get chewy. So if you want it crispy, eat them all right away or cook them longer. But I promise you, they will get chewy the next day. If you just pack them up, put them in their little airtight container, and then you pull them out the next day and they'll have that perfect chewy texture. So here are my little snowmen, and they're going to go in the oven for probably about 10 minutes. I've got a little teeny bit of dough left in there, and I won't waste it. But I'm just going to lay my cookies out. They're friends. They were holding hands. Just do a little surgery. And there we go. They're a little too hot for me to ice, so pause, and I'll be back in a minute when they're cool enough and I'll ice them up for you. Okay, let me show you how we decorate these guys. So here's my icing. I'm going to keep my little glass handy because I'll put it back in there. And you just, okay, with these bags, if you're going to use the zip top bags, make sure you don't get the kind that are, I think it's called gusseted or something. They sort of are pleated at the bottom, because those are a pain to work with. Make sure you just get regular bags. And then you want to cut the tiniest little hole that you can in the tip, because once you get it too big, it's a pain, and you can always go back and make it a little bit bigger. So I want that to be a little bit bigger, but not much. Okay, so here I have a gingerbread man. So I'm just going to give him a couple eyes and a smile and some buttons. These are really yummy with raisins. If you want to just put a few raisins on there, and that's good enough, okay? Smiley face and some buttons. If you want to get fancy, you can give him a bow tie, and you can give him a little sweater vest. And then again, he gets buttons. And usually when I'm dressing my gingerbread man in a vest and a bow tie, I also give him shoes. Of course, my kids like for their gingerbread men and snowmen to be very well dressed, because that means more icing, right? So let me do a snowman. These guys, they spread out a little bit more than I wanted, but that's okay. So I just kind of outline his hat. If I had red and green, I would do a little holly leaf on his hat, just because that's cute. So he gets a couple buttons as well, and he gets some eyes, and of course a smile. And I usually give him some mittens. And then I'll go back and fill those in. My happy little snowman waving. My daughter saw the stars and she said, "Oh, are they snowflakes?" Like, no, they're stars, but that's a perfect idea. So let's make them snowflakes. So with this, oh, the kids would have a lot of fun. Just being really creative. And I am certainly going to have my kids come and help me finish decorating these, but it is the first day of December, and it's really warm, and so I sent them out to play. I heard my timer. I'm going to check on my snowmen. Let me finish this real quick. So I did that kind of sloppily. But see how that makes a nice little snowflake? Your children are geniuses, I'm telling you. They're not quite done, but let me show you what happened. Look how big and puffy they are. They're gigantic. I need a taste tester. Is there anybody available to taste?
We're available.
Yeah.
These are huge, humongous. Do you need one that big?
We can share one.
Yeah. I want the top half.
The top half?
Uh-huh.
How about share this snowman? So we'll give him a nice little hat, and we'll give him mittens,
Coloring mittens.
and we'll just put some snow along the bottom.
Okay.
See how cute he is? How are you going to divide him in half?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Okay, so this is what we have to do.
You have to cut him.
Tell him to close his eyes.
Close your eyes, Mr. Snowman.
Close your eyes. See, I told you that they would be crispy at the beginning, but tomorrow these will be soft. Just cut him right in half. Okay, tell me how they are.
Poor Mr. Snowman.
Delicious. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Should everybody make these?
Yeah.
Are these your favorite? What's your favorite Christmas cookie?
Press cookies.
Press cookies?
The mint ones.
The
I
chocolate,
love
the chocolate with the mint, chocolate on top.
Oh yeah, those were good. And
Okay,
then-
those are both on my website. The chocolate mint cookies are like a chocolate cookie with the mint flavored chocolate on top, and then press cookies are like a sugar cookie. You know, they're almond flavored out of a cookie press. Okay, this is just the beginning. More Christmas cookies to come. Happy holiday baking. I everybody, let me give you just a little bit more information, a couple tips about these gingerbread cookies. So, these first guys that I baked, I left the dough in the fridge for about an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and a half. My recipe says 2 hours, and that is because if you want your cookies to keep a more defined shape, the dough needs to be colder. So you saw how easy that was for me to roll out. Yes, it was very easy to roll out, and it hadn't been refrigerated quite as long, and they spread out a little bit more. So here is a cookie that baked after the dough had been refrigerated a little over an hour. This guy was actually refrigerated overnight, and you can see the dough is a little bit darker. It just darkened in color a little bit, and he's a little bit smaller. I rolled it to the same thickness, same size cookie cutter. So you see this one spread out a little bit more. Does it affect the taste at all? No, not at all. But I know some people really like to have a very crisp, defined shape. So even, this was the first tray I rolled out after being refrigerated overnight. So these guys are all a little bit smaller. And then, you know, you cut out your shapes, you have the little scraps, you roll that up and you roll it out again, and then they start spreading out. Okay? So that's just the nature of rolled and cut cookies. Now, if you really want a very, very defined shape, you don't want your cookie to spread, you need to add more flour. And also, this dough actually works great for building a gingerbread house. We bought at a craft store quite a few years ago a gingerbread house, like a set of cookie cutters, which makes it really easy. And for that, you do want your dough to be stiffer, and so you'll need to add a little extra flour. So this recipe had almond flour, arrowroot starch, and a little coconut flour. So you could add a little more of any of those three or all three, and you'll be able to feel it. You know, you were mixing the dough. We saw how soft it was. It needs to be softer or stiffer. So about a 1/4 cup more flour, and make it a stiffer dough. So that will also give you, if you're just going to cut out shapes, give you a little bit more defined shape. But I think they're perfectly cute, just like this, and I wanted to show you all of them. So these were my snowmen, those ones that were made with the 3 balls. This is a big cookie. So like I said, this is a good size gift cookie or a party favor cookie. These littler guys are perfect for just your eating, or you know, having a Christmas party and you set out a plate of cookies. This is a nice 1 serving size cookie. Or these little stars that we turned into snowflakes on my daughter's suggestion. Now you have choices as well. Most recipes will tell you when you're cooling your cookies to put them on a cooling rack, which of course is a great idea if you have one. If you have a solid surface, any sort of stone countertop that's actually cooling by nature, and you can just lay your cookies right on the countertop. And if you want to keep things really neat and tidy with your decorating, and you have baked on parchment, then just leave your cookies on your parchment, and you know you'll have them spread out for baking so they don't bake into each other like a lot of mine did, because I was being lazy. Then just line them up on your parchment, and you can decorate right on your parchment, and then you aren't going to have to deal with cleaning icing off of your counter afterwards, which, you know, cleaning icing off the counter is not the worst thing. If you have little people in your house, they will be happy to come and clean it off with their fingers or their tongues, perhaps. You never know what you're going to get. So that's a quick way to decorate. So the other thing I wanted to show you with these cookies is their chewiness. Remember, I even showed you when I cut the cookie for my kids, pretty much right out of the oven, it was crispy. It kind of, little gingerbread guy's head cracked a little bit because they were crispy when they first come out of the oven. But then give them even just a couple hours and they get chewy, and they're that perfect sort of crisp on the outside and have that delicious chewy texture. So here you go. That's really true. And the only bad thing about these cookies is that they're very easy to eat, and they smell delicious, and your kitchen will smell amazing, and it will be really hard not to eat them all. So make them to give away. And that's it. So I kind of line my cookies up, and when I'm just doing them myself, I kind of do them assembly line style. So I get all the eyes, then do all the buttons, that sort of thing. So that's it, everybody. These are your totally minus the icing. Totally paleo gingerbread cookies. Again, I do have a paleo icing recipe on my website. I simply prefer the old-fashioned powdered sugar kind, and so that is what I have made today. It's just one of the compromises that we make, so you choose how you want to compromise. So get in the kitchen with your family, make some gingerbread men, gingerbread houses, and have a great time this holiday season. And come back for sure, because I'll be posting lots and lots of Christmas goodie recipes. So enjoy your baking. Happy holidays.